All right, enough about the overall Magic Round weekend. Let's key in on the Warriors' performance over the weekend, right? 30-26 against the Cowboys that, fired their shots very late in this contest and made this a little bit of a heart attack affair. But rewatching it again, I kind of have eased myself. When you watch the game, you're full of emotion. When I was in that fan section, you're full of emotion. You're riding the highs and you're riding the lows, and that's just the way it is. Rewatching the game, you kind of get a better feel of what kind of happened in that little sequence of that 15-minute sequence where the Cowboys just laid in 3 tries and really got them back into the contest. But I want to hear your thoughts, Sammy, as obviously a big man in the Warriors sanctum, Sports Nation and stuff. I want to hear your thoughts. You've obviously been around Blake Ashford and stuff after the game, but 30-26, just touching on this game before we touch on the season start, but I think a very solid performance. First half was probably the best sort of football we've seen, that connection between the boys, and they hit a game plan with the hammer to the nail. But your thoughts overall on this game, bro? 30-26 over the Cowboys that were running red hot coming into this game.
Yeah, so spot on in terms of that first half. I think at halftime, me and H said the exact same thing. We said that's probably the best half of football they've put together, so far this season. And it really has been, I guess, the story of the season, just getting better and better every week and little things starting to improve. And then, finally we see what things can be like when they click. I am very circumspect about that second half. So I saw a lot of emotion. I sort of see people saying, they classic Warriors, they nearly blew it. I'll pick up on a couple of things in that. Firstly, obviously Rocco going off, completely disjointed, the forward rotation, but also that edge, like Lecker at one point went to the right, then he went back to the left. Murata then sort of hopped out there for a bit. And then, not to mention, I guess, Tane. And I mean, that left edge for the Cowboys, despite where they sit on the ladder, is one of the best edges in the comp. Jeremiah Nanai, Tommy Dead, and Scotty Drinkwater lurking, and Murray Taulagi. I mean, and Jackson Purdue, who's turned into a bit of a sort of superstar for them. So a very, very lethal edge that just kept going at the Warriors pretty much that whole game. But just in that second half, when the defensive structure collapsed a little bit, they just found a little bit more easy. So in a way, I look at that and go, yep, they sort of turned on the Jets and started firing. And the Cowboys are a momentum team, right? As soon as they get their heels up, like Brisbane, they go for it. And you see actually with Brisbane against Penrith, it goes the other way. As soon as they get put in a hole, it's like they almost give up. They go into their shell. Guys that are great players, Adam Reynolds, Ben Hunt, etc., become sort of nobodies, and everything gets a bit overwhelming. So I think we did really well with that barrage coming at us to actually hold on, especially in that last sort of 10 or 15 minutes. So I'm a lot more positive about that. The other thing as well that I find, just reflecting back, at the start of the game, I said to Aish, gave our predictions out, and I said the Warriors by 4. So I knew, everyone knew it was going to be a tight game. I mean, people said 100%. It was going to be the game of the weekend. The bookies, had it similar as well. So, whether or not you're going against a quality side, knowing that a win's a win, no matter whether it's 4 points or 20 points, it doesn't matter if you're the team that comes back, if they're the team that comes back, if it's back and forth the whole game, whatever. At the end of the day, it was a close game against a good team that we closed out and we won. And people saying we nearly blew it. Well, we didn't blow it. If we did blow it, we'd be having a different conversation. We'd be talking 100%. About, how they faltered in the second half. But they held it together when a team was red hot and firing at them, when their attack was running hot. We had defensive, shifts and moves and forward rotations going out of whack, and we held on. So that to me is a massive positive. I think it's a huge win. I think it's it sort of reminds me of that Sharks win, with Shawnee kicking the goal 2 years ago, where it's quite sort of season defining, you were just on the edge here of, is this team a top 4 team? Are they imposters a little bit? Well, I think it sort of proves that they're on this, the other side of the ledger now, that they're more of a team that will challenge. That's, I guess, the positive to take away from it all. So.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit of context to that as well. So, running hot in that first half, we scored all our five tries in that first half. Absolutely incredible. When I rewatched the game going into the second half, you just completely, sometimes you just blank out, right? When you're in the madness of watching it live, and you kind of forget the moments that you end up having to start that first half. And when rewatching it, the Warriors actually didn't come out flat in that first half. They actually started fairly well. We end up causing a couple of errors out of Murray Taulagi in that, a couple of really nice turnovers. And then Rocco obviously went down with his injury. I'm pretty sure there was a 7-tackle set that was given away that Murray Taulagi had his leg up in the air. That didn't get given our way. The boys are calling for a challenge. It didn't end up going through. And the Cowboys started to find their momentum off the back of that, right? Not so calling referees or anything like that. That's just what happened in the game. Looking at the tries that they did score to get themselves back into the game, the kick to the corner of Robert Derby. Robert Derby's got a bit of speed. Gossy maybe felt himself caught lacking a little bit there. But, it was an early kick, beautiful kick, Jake Clifford. That ball can bounce different ways. Derby goes over in the corner. Now we're going to the point of, that's where, as you said, you had Lecker probably defend out in that edge that I noticed first of all, Murata, and then ended up being Catewell. And we know Catewell, defensively, he's done really well at that edge before. We've seen it with the Broncos game, a lot of great cover tackles. He does really well on that edge. That Murray Taulagi try, the shape that the defensive shape and the shape that they ran, we defended that fairly well to where we had our cover support out the back of that. And Kurt Capewell got a real decent piece on Murray Taulagi there for the tackle into the corner. Very similar to how Luke Metcalf nearly got the piece of Murray Taulagi when he ended up getting a try saver. Murray Taulagi's brilliance, bro. To legit do an absolute, like a plank to stay in. Incredible, bro. Incredible. Yeah. And then that's when the momentum started to roll, and it felt like, there was a couple of errors the Warriors had in there. I think CNK dropped the ball, and then we had the last try for the Cowboys before that, where, we were defending that set really well. I thought the shape that they were throwing, we started to defend it really, really well. And then there was a kick that got put in. That was a little bit of a nothing kick that Tane kind of picked up a little bit of pressure and unfortunately coughed these lollies due to a really nice shot from Jackson Purdue. And that's a forced error from our end, right? So if you actually think of it in context, they've had 2 tries here off of kicks, one due to a little bit of an error from our back end, and 1 try due to a beautiful shape that we nearly defended in that area as well. So that could have gone 50-50 2 different ways in that contest. Obviously, if, Catewell put Murray Taulagi out in that period, maybe this is a different talking point. Maybe the Warriors get down the opposite end of the field and start, working on things and push this out to a better margin. But I feel like the boys, as I said, the scoring finished there at the 62nd minute. So that's a good, 18 minutes left in that game that we defended our hearts out, to get that victory. And I think a lot of people are going to take a lot of positive out of that because we defended our line with incredible, we were really sturdy on our line there, just whatever the Cowboys were throwing. And the attacking shape the Cowboys run too, as you pointed out, Sammy, they're so tight. Their connection to have on our side, the way they hide Scotty Drinkwater out the back of shape, the way Tom Dearden just straightens up that defender and really, makes him come in. You got those 3 options, you're damned if you go in on on Tom Dearden because he's got a dummy and go in him. He goes short to Jeremiah Nenai. He's going through that gap. You go out the back, the Scotty Drinkwater, and he's got options out the back of him, bro. Honestly, it's a pick your poison sort of attack. Sort of defensively, you got to figure that out. And I thought the boys did really well at the end there. And a guy I wanted to point out too, Sam Healey making his debut into this game in a key moment in this game as well. Yeah. Your thoughts on his performance, bro? I've watched a lot of him in Cup. I'm sure you have as well. A very talented young kid. But, other than that hospital ball he put on to Aaron Clark, he really found himself into the contest early and almost pulled away with a massive try saver. Very similar, moments these young kids have. Lecker, first game for us, Bulldogs almost getting a try winning, game there. And then we had, obviously Sam Healey almost, pulling off that moment. Your thoughts on his debut then, the future maybe of Sam Healey coming up?
Yeah, super excited when, sort of found out that it was going to happen, and me and Ace just sort of talked about it all in the pre-game, and because obviously we tend to arrive at Mount Smart quite early for getting prepped for commentary stuff, so we obviously see the Cup games and see Sam playing there and how exciting he is. So yeah, real pumped to see him come on, and it was pretty obvious that Webby's starting to move to having a specialist like hooker on the bench because Wade's not going to play 80 minutes now. That sort of, he's done that dash, I think, through the first 7 or 8 weeks. We were carrying 4 forwards. Now we're sort of going to carry 3 in a hooker, or maybe they'll carry some sort of utility that slots into that hooker role. But we said during the game, I said it before the game, I said, how do they use Sam Healey? And it was pretty obvious how they're going to use him. As the game went on, it was the question is, when's he going to come on? How long is he going to play for, etc. Then the Rocco injury happened. Yeah. And ordered up straight away and said, this is going to be interesting now, because if Sam Healey was a guy who had played in the NRL for years and years and years, as a coach, you'd be okay with it because, you'd know that you can shift things around and, they can play a role. But you're now giving a debut in first grade to a guy who's probably going to be playing out of position, because of the shifting around. And that's a big call to make, right? With Webby, and massive for Sam Healey, because and not only that, so you throw that in there. Not only that, you are now coming on against a team that's just scored 3 tries and is hot on your heels. You're trying to close out a game, and this is what Ash said. He said the pressure on the guy, whether he was coming in to orchestrate a comeback if the Warriors were down, like say they made their kicks and maybe they scored one more, we're down by 4 points. So he's either coming on to orchestrate, a comeback, or he's coming on to hold on for dear life. Either way, an enormous, bit of pressure to be placed on a guy who's never played in first grade before. He's playing his NRL debut, at Magic Round. So I just thought he handled that so well. You mentioned, a bit of probably early nerves and with the hospital pass, but from there, like the confidence of the guy, and I guess it's even sounding like a cliche now, but what Webby and I guess sort of Cappy through development of pathways, what they've achieved as a club now is remarkable. And the fact that we can bring these guys through and they don't look out of place. These guys can come in and play one game, and if Sam Healey went back to Cup for a couple of weeks, he'd be totally fine coming straight back in when he's needed to. When he needs to. These guys aren't like deer in the headlights, fish out of water. They don't belong here. They've been developed and pulled through a pathway so precisely that now they're hitting first grade at the exact right time. And I just think I think Sam is an unbelievable player. Like he excites me so much. Like all of them excite me so much, like Becker and Dimitrik and Ali. Like I said this at the start of the season, I honestly didn't care if we missed the top 8 or not this year, because I was that excited about just seeing the young guys. And every time there's a new debut, it just gets me really fired up. So he is going to be the future number 9, and for now he is, to me, the ultimate replacement for Wade, for whether it's 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. Just the perfect guy to come on and do that job. He's a bigger body, but he's fast. He's got a good pass on him. He's got a great run, and pretty good football skills as well. For you just manage the bounce of that ball, then
bro, and like honestly, the whole fan base is going up, bro. And I kind of saw the ball touch the line before that, but to see the athleticism of him, like 6'1", bro, hooker. Like I got told when I was coming from my junior grades, as soon as I got my growth spurt, I moved out of hooker. They put me out to the center wings and stuff. They're like, you're too big for hooker, bro. You can't get that, like too tall for hooker, right? Not too big. I was never too big, but too big for hooker. You move out. But this kid, he just shows like, and not just off the back. He obviously pointed out passing skills. He's got his running skills. Like everyone that knows that Cup, they know he's got that running game on point. But his defensive skills, bro, like in that last closing effort, there was a couple of beautiful shots he pulled off right under the ball, hit it right at the perfect point. He's a big body in the middle, defends really well. And we're just, as you said before, Webby's sort of bringing these young kids in, and they're not really looking at a place to where like they're developing to right at that point of where they're jumping in, and you can't like. The old days of Warriors, when we'd give a debut to a rookie, it'd be rocks or diamonds. You never know what you can really get out of these kids.
100%.
But I feel like this is like the first sort of time, this period under Webby, I feel like every debut I've just been like, yeah, great. I get to see a new kid. I get to see what he's got. Like MGT when he debuted, incredible. Laban when he debuted, incredible. Zion when he debuted when he was with us, incredible. Everyone was calling for him for being the starting front rower that year too. Like honestly, full credit to the boys and full credit to the club in general for doing this the proper way and building our systems from the ground up, and not putting him in too early and ruining their development. They're putting him in the perfect time where they're ready to go. So full credit to Webby on that.
You know what's a good example of that as well, and this I don't necessarily blame the club for how this was handled, but like Ali Katoa was the classic example of during the COVID era, his development was so out of whack because I don't know if people sort of are aware, but because the Warriors didn't have a reserve grade team, they were sending guys to play for Redcliffe, but they were only allowed to send, I think it was 2 or 3 guys a week. So they had to be very selective with who was playing. So there were weeks where Ali Katoa didn't play any football, but then there were weeks where he'd come in and play 60, 70 minutes for the first grade team. And it completely ruined his sort of development run into that first grade side. And like I said, not blaming the club necessarily because of COVID. But, he ended up being a gun. We all knew he was going to be a gun, but he didn't quite get the time that these others are getting where they're not having to worry about that anymore, right? And they're able to come. And, mate, the Harold Matts winning is great just because it's a Warriors team winning a competition. But, that is exciting for the fact that that's the next crop coming through. They've now won 2 comps in a row, and only 2 or 3 players from last year were in this year's team. So you basically got 2 groups of champions that are going to be now pulled through. into SG ball and into reserve grade and stuff. Like it's just really exciting where the club's heading with that junior talent. And to your point, seeing that these guys are coming in and they're not rocks and diamonds, they're the real deal, is sort of like, man, I can't wait to see like a full 17 of these guys, as much as I love, some of the more experienced guys and guys we've pulled in from different clubs.
Yep.
I just can't wait to see, that almost like full 17 of just what we've developed.